G'day legends, I hope you are having a fantastic day, no matter where you are. Now today, we're going to just change it up a little bit and we're going to go over the maps first before we dive into the news and the politics and how this week could really decide the future of this conflict, with of course future funding being potentially held up both in the US and the EU, and that figure between them is over $100 billion. And all of this is set to come to a head in the next couple of days. Now, like I said, we're going to jump into the maps first. We're going to be going over a new map as well. So here we go. Ukraine, of course, in the center here, the capital of Kiev. The red areas are areas occupied since 2022, well, Russia's 22 invasion, and the purple since 2014. The green indicates land either Russia has pulled back from or Ukraine had successful counter-offensives and pushed the Russians back there. Now, of course, we've got Romania, hello to Andrew Tate, Poland, Belarus, and Russia around here. Now, the first place I do want to come down into is down then into Thankyou. Now, we see just down here, we see a little bit of grey zone. Now, on some maps, this will be shown as blue or green or blue, indicated that Ukraine has a foothold there. Now, we do know Ukraine does have a foothold there, and we do know over the last 48 hours, Russia has launched another attack into Thankyou, but there hasn't been any territorial change, as you can see here, no territorial change. But it said also that Ukraine has 300 personnel also inside Thankyou or around the surrounding areas here. So a fair bit of men. As we spoke about last time, Russia had a failed push down off this road into here, and we saw then many armoured vehicle losses as well as human losses there as well. Now, on the other map, what I do want to show you is just how we can have a bit of a look around some of these regions. Now, on this map, of course, this is Syriac maps. It does surprise me Syriac has this in blue and Deep State has this in grey, as Deep State is a Ukrainian Western sources map. Is very unbiased, just mapping, does a fantastic job. All of you, Signal, Telegram, Twitter, watch Syriac. He does a fantastic job a lot of his time, as well as you'd like to chuck in a couple of bucks to him. He does like I do. He crowdfunds all of his work. But let's have a look here. So, of course, Russia came off this road and was ambushed from artillery on the other side, on the right side of the Dnipro River here. So we can push down and just have a look at how this ground sits. Now, you are going to have to bear with me as this map will take just a little bit to load at some points as we're looking at it in 3 dimensions. It's Australia, it's very slow, and this 3-dimensional map does take a little bit to load. And what you can see is also this area is very flat. But what this map will give us is we'll be able to look further in at buildings, at the lay of the land, and how things are actually looking. So, of course, Russia came off here and was ambushed in through these areas back from where Ukraine was firing. What we will do is we will rotate around and see where this artillery really is firing from. Now, we don't know, of course, the exact artillery spots, but it is firing across from the right bank. Of course, when you're saying banks of rivers, you're talking about the way of flow. So the left bank is where Russia control, the right bank is where Ukraine control, and that the artillery is firing from some region across here into Thankyou. Now, of course, artillery has a hell of a long range, especially with some of the modern artillery that the West has delivered into Ukraine. So can be in a large bubble around here, hitting targets in there. Now, neither map show any updates, so we're going to jump back onto the Deep State, and we have somehow lost the map. And then we're going to jump down, or across actually, to Robotyne. So to the south of Kyiv. This is where we saw Russia have that really large jump and gained in basically 36-hour period, gained months worth of offensive actions from Ukraine there. So let's jump back to where we saw that. So we saw this, and then we do see that Ukraine has brought more of this back under control. Now, on this map here, that's where we'll then cruise up to Brittany here and have a look. And what you will see is just how flat, again, these regions are and what is being fought through. And of course, in these flat areas, it means a lot of ground can be gained or lost very quickly. And of course, the artillery battle here, this helps a lot of just the flatness of these areas, and there's no real high ground in here. So when people speak about the high ground here, you're looking at compared to the rest of the ground in here. But as far as anything major, not really. But we will talk about more of the high ground just a little bit later on. But let's see then what Suryak actually has to say about this. Situation on Zap front. Russian army advanced 900 meters north of Novopodivka, taking control over a trench area of Robotyny. So this, of course, is the gain that we saw then the other day, but we hadn't fully caught up at least on what he was then saying. Now, where we are going to move to is we've seen no real change in any area down along here, but where we do see is near Novomakalivka, we do see a change. So let's jump back to the 10th, that was the 9th, and we see Russia make a fairly significant gain then up this road. And let's actually look and see what Suryak has to say about this. Situation in southwest Donetsk. During the last days, the situation for the Ukraine army in Novomakalivka has been complicated. Despite that Russian army advance was minimal, the Ukrainian troops withdrew towards the town due to the approaching of combatants. So moving down this road into here. Now let's have a look and see if we can see why that withdrawal was there. Now, of course, if things are out in the open in flat ground, it becomes a lot more difficult to hold areas of ground, and you will see withdrawal. So this is what they're saying here. This is on the Suryak map. And then let's see if we can actually see on then if this will load the satellite map for us. So the Suryak map here is actually showing significantly less than the Western deep state map here. So let's have a look where this tree line comes back around here. This is this tree line here. So showing significantly less and saying that with Ukrainian forces withdrew from here. So we're not, of course, we're not exactly sure where the trench lines sit here, but we see they have pushed down along this road, and saying that Ukrainian forces did then withdraw back into Novomakalivka here. So there was a significant gain on some maps. So you look at the pro-Ukrainian map here, and maps shouldn't have a pro side. Like, maps should just be the map. Anyway, where we really want to look at now is Mariinka, and I've got a little bit of footage to show you from Mariinka as well as a geolocation. So let's have a look here. Now, in this video, what we do see, we see two Russian troops here with, of course, a Russian white, blue, and red flag. Now, hoisting this flag up. Now, Mariinka is completely destroyed. It is absolutely flattened. And of course, this is what we talked about, they're having a lot of problems fighting in here, both Russia and Ukraine, because there's nothing left. There's not that much to cover in. You just rubble to rubble, shell hole to shell hole. So hoisting then that flag there, and then that has been geolocated to right here. So right on the outskirts of Mariinka. And this is areas we know Ukraine held some on the outskirts here. So judging by that, maybe not, but Ukraine still holds some areas up around here on the northwestern side. So let's have a look. Last couple of days, we see Russia slowly make more moves through there up to where that geolocation then looks. Now, let's have a look on this map. Now, this is showing very different, where on the deep state still shows grey zone here. This is saying that Russia have complete control over this western edge here other than here, and actually puts through a little bit more there. Suryak also does say about some movement made in the direction of Pobeda down here. So situation west of City, Russian army continue securing the flanks of Mariinka in the direction of Pobeda. So let's try and line up where this actually then is. So of course this is this roundabout here. So this is where the deep state Suryak are so weird, because Suryak shows more down this road where deep state will show less, but saying that they did secure more area down on these flanks here. So yeah, in between. This is why we like it when maps actually line up and show us what is going on in some different regions as we talk. Now, where will we go to next? Well, we'll go up, of course, then into Avdiivka. Roll back a couple of days and just have a look at where things are moving. So the flanks look fairly like they're not moving, but you can see just in the center here that Russia is making more ground than into the center and a little bit just south of Vesely in here, but nothing too major like we had seen. But I'll show you why this area here does look to be fairly important. Now, let's have a look. So Avdiivka here, I wish this map you could scroll to and from looking on other days. But of course, this is Avdiivka in here, and you can see that Russia is securing this high ground. Now, of course, we have this quarry here, but you can see that this is the high ground looking over where Avdiivka then goes down. And there's a lot of higher ground. Now, these aren't mountains, I know this, but there is higher ground going down into Avdiivka. Now, of course, high ground, it doesn't matter if you're fighting with a sword or fighting with artillery. High ground is always good to have, especially for firing down in and the artillery there on the sides. Now, what we're going to do is we're just going to come down in this sort of region here and just have a look at how the ground is actually sitting for where the Russian forces are as well. Now, you'll see as well this, what do you call it, like the waste of another quarry here. But of course, this is somewhat of the high ground on the flanks here as well. So Avdiivka is slowly looking like what we've said, similar to what we saw in Bakhmut. The flanks getting squeezed in, center pushing through. But like we saw in Bakhmut, it's going to be a hell of a fight if and when Russia do start pushing in. And let's have a look at what the British MOD have to say about this. Now, I've said to people have a bit of a go at me about using this like that. It's not intel because it's biased. I agree that it's very biased, but we use it because we don't actually get that many like official updates coming out. But yes, you need to take these with, you need to actually see this, that of course the UK has chosen a side in this. But over the last week, the Donetsk Oblast town of Avdiivka has continued to be the scene of the most intense combat on the front, as reflected in official Ukrainian public release data. On some days, approaching 40% of all combat engagements have likely taken place in this small sector. So this is where Russia is pushing the hardest and Ukraine is having to defend the hardest. The Russian offensives have continued to be characterized by largely dismounted infantry assaults, often by Storm Z penal units, so conscripts. But we have seen a lot of footage in here too of your more elite sort of like VDV units working in here, as well as we had a lot of rumor about Wagner PMC guys working then as like small group training instructors too, and instructing how to work. If anyone's like Australia more familiar with like how the MTF or MRTF trips worked in Afghanistan. Anyway, Ukrainian units have likely conducted successful local counter attacks, denying Russian forces full control of the village of Stepovy. It is here that Russia is attempting one part of a pincer movement to envelop Avdiivka and its heavily defended industrial zone. So, of course, this is Stepovy up here of where they're talking about this first part of the pincer movement is happening. And, of course, down here to come in and strategically cut off Avdiivka. Now, how long will this hold for? Well, how long is a piece of string? What we saw with Bakhmut, we thought tomorrow, for 6 or more months. Now, let's just look at what Surik actually has to say. Now, this is in the center on that little bit of high ground we're talking about. Russian army advanced west of the quarry, reaching the street of Kolosava. However, it's premature to confirm the consolidation of positions there. So have pushed beyond that quarry of where we had looked, but too early to say that they've actually consolidated all their forces in there. This was the War Mapper weekly update too. Russia's offensive operations around Avdiivka continued with attacks on both flanks as well as on the city itself. Russia has continued to make gradual progress and has now advanced into the northern outskirts of the city that is being shown across multiple different maps as we go. Now, where else to go other than up into Bakhmut? But I think we do see some small territorial shift here. No, we don't. I'm thinking of things. So let's come up into Bakhmut and see what Deep State map shows. And a lot of change up around Kromove. So, of course, Bakhmut itself, then we see that it extends the grey zone out to what was the Road of Life and extends a long way into the grey zone up here and then has held those positions. Yes, some little bits move forward and back, but Russia has made a significant jump up in there. And let's then see what these maps say about this. Now, first we'll do the War Mapper. After smaller attacks in recent weeks, Russia has swiftly reclaimed control of most of the territory west of Bakhmut that they had lost during Ukraine's counter-offensives around the city earlier in the year. So, of course, let's just have a scroll back here. This green, this is where Ukraine got on their counter-offensive in the north of Bakhmut, and within a couple of days, as War Mapper says, what specific wording does he use? Reclaimed control of most of the territory. So most of the territory made in that offensive was taken swiftly, as War Mapper says, in a couple of days there. And I think that is concerningly quick there. So let's look at day 654. What happened? Russian army captured the rest of the trenches north of Kromove. In addition, troops continue advancing from many axes, forcing Ukrainian army to withdraw from serious positions towards more fortified areas adjacent to the road to Chasiv Yar. This is the road we're then talking about. Now, wrong one. Then the next day here, this is then the same road here. You can just see this jump up. Russian army increased the buffer zone around the city by taking the western forest, forcing Ukrainian army to withdraw towards the defences around Ivanovsky. Moreover, Russian troops made new advances north of Bodanivka, in which clashes are taking place now. So this is just up to the north of where we're talking about in here. So pretty significant gains in there. And let's have a look down on this Google Earth map and just look exactly where we're talking about, and look at where this is now cutting through on that so-called road of life. At least that's what it was named when it was holding, and that was the way in and out for support in Bakhmut. Now, let's just have a look at this. Now, a little bit more hilly territory. Now, this is Bohanivka here. You can see fairly flat, but these hills too, these rolling hills that I've talked about in Bakhmut before, this has allowed both Ukraine and Russia to use their artillery in defilade position, and has been really helpful in the defense of Bakhmut for Ukraine, of course, putting their guns in defilade positions, making it a lot harder for Russia to get to those. But you can see too where Russia's pushing up to, looking down onto Ivanovsky, down into Kromove region, just at the rolling hills, and how this can help on the offense of these areas, but also in the defense here as well. Now, we are sort of upside down, so it's a little bit harder to then look at. And also in the south, we know that Russia has made, over the past couple of weeks, a lot of ground out towards Klishkivka here. Now, this was ground made by Ukraine in their offensive operation, but you can just see the rolling nature of these hills here. That does give, if I can roll, does give an advantage to anyone on the high ground, and an artillery advantage. But Ukraine definitely still has an advantage with a lot of the artillery. So if we come and we start look back down into Bakhmut here. Now, if we come down onto, let's get rid of that, going down to here, you'll just see these. Now, this doesn't look as much as it is, but this is where we can see, looking down into Ivanovsky, into Bakhmut, these rolling hills here have given Ukraine a hell of a lot of advantage of their artillery in some of these regions into the center of Bakhmut. Now, pulling up from Bakhmut, we're then going to go into Vesely. We saw Russia make a lot of ground here as well. Let's go back to where we saw that. So back on the 8th to the 9th, the 10th, we saw that. Now, since then, we've seen Ukraine make a little chunk back of ground here from Rozdelivka, and then Russia make a little bit more out from the northeast of Vesely, as Ukraine and Russia go back and forward in that area. Now, let's look at what Surak has to say. Situation on the Eastern Front. Russian army made significant progress south of Rozdelivka and southwest of Vesely. A semicircle movement is taking place to force Ukrainian army to withdraw from the last village. So the push up, this, of course, is Rozdelivka. So in here, so we do believe that actually has maybe been closed off there, but we are somewhat incorrect. Maybe Deep State incorrectly pushed the map too far up into that same region. Now, we're going to talk about then up in the Kremenar region. So then Warmapper has said Russia has been carrying out attacks at many points along the front line in the past week and has advanced northwest of Kremenar. Now, I sort of had to line up where the hell this actually was. Of course, we have Kremenar here. We have Terny, Yampolivka here. So this region they're talking about sits basically just in here. Now, of course, this is very, very difficult to actually line up where this is, but let's roll back, and we're not seeing any real movement on there. But Warmapper, who's very conservative towards gains normally, is saying that there is more ground being made there. Now, let's just have a jump then up into this area, the Sinkivka, Kupiansk front, and that it does show that Russia did make some ground there and then did lose some more as well. Now, I don't think I've got any specific update on that. No, I don't. But let's just jump onto Google Earth and see how this is actually going to look here as well. So we're talking about in about this region here. Now, as well, you can see rolling hills. This can be used to advantage, but of course, Ukraine, big agricultural sector, all farmland. This is where we see the use of drones. We see, of course, then the use of artillery and open areas like this really suits that sort of warfare and can be real hell on earth for tanks and dismounted infantry as well. Now, this is where Russia is really hoping to get a foothold, is in and around Sinkivka here, and then, of course, this push down to Kupiansk, trying to get this six-ways road through the forest area here. As you can see, sort of rolling-ish, but still, again, fairly flat. And I hope that gives you some idea of what it is. And as we see individual pushes in areas, we will speak more and more on the lay of the land and how that can actually control things. And this map wasn't really liking me and loading for me too quickly today, but we will improve that. Now, we have been closely following how Congress has recently voted down a bill that would included $60 billion more funding to Ukraine. President Zelensky has, over the last day, travelled to the US in a last-minute effort to try and rally more support for military aid going to Ukraine. Now, Zelensky kicked off his visit with a personal plea to Congress, speaking at a National Defense University in Washington, stating, "We won't give up. We know what to do, and you can count on Ukraine, and we hope just as much to be able to count on you." Let me be frank with you, friends. If there's anyone inspired by unresolved issues on Capitol Hill, it's just Putin and his sick clique. So, of course, this is talking about Ukraine saying that Russia is weaponizing time, that the unresolved issues, of course, is Putin happy about that. Now, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who introduced Zelensky, said America's commitments must be honored, America's security must be defended, and America's word must be kept. Of course, America's saying that they will be there supporting Ukraine until the end. John Kirby, the White House National Security Council spokesman, has told reporters on Monday that Zelensky's visit came at a critical time, saying this is exactly the right time to be having President Zelensky in town to have these discussions because of what's going on in Ukraine, the increased activity we're seeing by the Russian armed forces as winter approaches, but also what's going on in Capitol Hill. Now, of course, mostly because of exactly what's going on in Capitol Hill. I'm sure if the $60 billion went through and that aid was then guaranteed to go through, there'd be less need for him to go last minute to get to Capitol Hill to speak directly to Congress. Now, the US Congress is in now its final week before leaving for the holidays. We've spoken about how this will be a problem on that break. And questions still remain if Congress will actually be able to come to an agreement on any rounds of future aid or funding for Ukraine. Now, currently, political speakers comment that Republicans are using this as leverage to push for greater restrictions on immigration on the south border. As the Pentagon warns, Ukrainian funding is running on fumes. And this is really coming down to the wire. There's only a few days left, and this will absolutely have a huge effect on how the rest of this conflict will go moving forward. Now, how do I actually see this panning out? Well, US politics definitely isn't my strong suit. I don't know if it's anyone's strong suit, it's just how bloody wild and back and forward it is. But I think that the former Ukrainian president, Leonid Kuchma, sums it up well when he said, the US will lose face before the entire world if it abandons Kyiv. And I believe that is true. The US isn't prepared to lose face and really lose another conflict by not supporting Ukraine. And this does matter a lot for Russia. A lot for the US. Of course, Russia for many, many decades was the US's largest adversary. And in this, Russia would see that as a huge win. And like Zelensky said earlier on, that the one who really likes the indecision on Capitol Hill is Putin. And I do think that a bill will be passed to supply more funding to Ukraine, but it's not going to be the complete $61 billion. I don't think it's going to be at least that complete $61 billion. But it will be some. And Ukraine's defense really relies so heavily on US support. And the past couple of weeks, past few months, we have been seeing cracks start to form in that support. So it's not just this aid. You've got to remember there's going to have to be another year or more of war funding to go out of this. Some journalists have suggested how more funding for Ukraine could be found. So this was published today, I believe, in The Guardian. I could be incorrect, but this is by Olena Hlushka, who is the co-founder of the International Center for Ukrainian Victory. Now, it's just here's how to find more funds for Ukraine, liquidate Russia's $300 billion in frozen assets. Of course, the White House warned the US will run out of funds for Ukraine by the end of the year if Congress don't approve a new assistance package like we spoke about. Now, as spoken about here, that hopefully the aid packages being debated in the US and Europe will be approved. But there is a straightforward way to unlock more funding for Ukraine. While we are grateful for every penny of international assistance, it is time to make Russia pay too by confiscating the $300 billion in Russian central bank assets currently frozen by Western states. The G7 and EU could work towards the G7 and the EU could work towards this in a coalition. Continuing here. This has been suggested before, but opponents hide behind a variety of legal, economic, and political objections. The primary legal obstacle to confiscation, often cited, is the sovereign immunity of states, or the idea that all states should be immune to proceedings and they don't consent to in other jurisdictions. Now, I understand that of the sovereignty immunity of states, because I don't want someone seeing Australia as the bad guy and go, we're just going to take Willie's house because we're at war with Australia. Stuff him. I understand that too. However, international law lacks clarity on whether this concept applies to confiscation orders issued by other states rather than the courts. Meanwhile, confiscating Russian assets fully aligns with international law as lawful countermeasure under the 2001 UN Articles on the responsibility of states' internationally wrongful acts. If Russia opts to cease aggression and pay reparations later, the confiscated amounts can be offset due to payment. So, of course, she is the co-founder of the International Center for Ukrainian Victory. So, of course, there is some bias there. And really, my reading in this was a little bit different. So, the conclusions I came to is that it's not that easy. There's massive doubts between France, Germany, and Belgium, of course, powerhouses in the EU, in Europe, about the underwriting of the actual euro and how that will affect the euro, that it could destabilize it more so than not only the legal concerns there, but a lot of articles, a lot what I was reading through is that this just won't happen anytime soon. It's still a long way, as there's still also a lot of legal doubts. And as well, one of the things that's going to hold this up mostly that I see is it needs the unanimous backing of all 27 EU states to actually enact this through. Now, of course, we're going to talk about Orban, Hungary in a sec. A senior EU diplomat talking about this said a group of member states still has legal concerns. Nothing that I could see happening in the near future. Now, what's more likely is that tax and interest collected on these frozen assets will be transferred to Ukraine. And Belgium has estimated that it will collect 2.3 billion euros in taxes in 23 and 24 financial year, that it would use these proceeds to help in reconstruction aid to Ukraine. Now, the EU member states will actually meet in the next 2 days, being the 14th and 15th of December, for the EUCO. This isn't to be expected in the main topics of discussion. We have a rundown here of that, talking about agenda highlights, Ukraine, Middle East, and enlargement of the EU. Of course, enlargement of the EU really responds to Ukraine, and of course talking about Ukraine in this and Middle East. But I guarantee with this, the Middle East will be a big topic of discussion, what is happening as well. Speaking of this, on Thursday when the EU's gather in Brussels, the plan is apparently to greenlight the start of the formal accession talks for Ukraine into the EU. Now, of course, this is just the next step in a bloody long ladder of steps towards full European Union membership. And along this, there's no guarantees of success. And of course, they'll also be talking about a $53 billion package of financial assistance is also due to be signed off here. But Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban, has threatened to use his veto power to actually derail both of these. Now, of course, this is Orban and Zelensky had a face-to-face chat here as well. Now, we don't exactly know what was said here, but it did look fairly in your face, fairly tense, like when someone knocks my beer over at the pub. And we know that Ukraine has really put that Orban is a mouthpiece for the Kremlin, for Putin. Now, we have as well here that this week Orban's allies are meeting with Republicans in Washington. Allies of far-right Prime Minister Viktor Orban will hold a closed-door meeting with Republicans in Washington to push for an end to US military support to Ukraine. Members of the Hungarian Institute of International Affairs and staff from the Hungary Embassy in Washington will on Monday begin a two-day event hosted by Conservative Heritage Foundation think tank. So, of course, trying to influence not only the US's money, but Orban as well has veto power in the EU, NATO too. So this week, the stakes for Ukraine are just unbelievably high of where this actually goes. Now, where this goes, I don't know. I'm not willing to speculate on where it bloody will go, at least far down the path. But don't underestimate how important it is for Ukraine that this goes through. Now, there was as well an attack last night by 18 Shahed drones and 8 cruise or ballistic missiles into Ukraine as well. Ukrainian defense has said that they have shot down all of these systems fired in. We have a little bit of footage here that has cast some doubt. This was posted by United 24, of course, a Ukrainian-owned and run media outwork. So, following the missiles interception at these areas, here we go, ballistics on Kiev, and these massive hole here. This is where people have thrown doubt. Is that just debris at that point? Or ballistic missiles? Those were successfully intercepted by air defense forces, destroying the aerial targets, and they came down in these regions. So, of course, there's always going to be speculation around this, but still, Russia will continue its campaign and will lift this campaign of drones and ballistic weapons into Ukraine to try and hit critical infrastructure targets there as well. Not only have we seen them hit civilian infrastructure and areas, well, the infrastructure, that is a legitimate military target. I know people hate when I say that, but we would do the same. But we have seen them hit just blatant civilian areas, but as well, when they're hit, the debris falling can go anywhere and have hit a lot of civilian areas and killed people as well. But legends, that is it for today. Now, I hope you're having a great day, and I'll speak to you very soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.